Hi, I'm Department of Consumer Affairs Commissioner Lorelei Salas. Did you earn $66,000 or less last year? You can file your taxes for free with NYC Free Tax Prep and keep your entire refund. Call 311 or visit nyc.gov/taxprep to learn about trusted professional filing with NYC Free Tax Prep.
Hi, I'm Joe Esposito, Commissioner at New York City Emergency Management. Be the first to know when an emergency happens with Notify NYC. Get the free app today for your Apple or Android device. You can also visit nyc.gov/notifynyc. Call 311 or follow @NotifyNYC on Twitter. Remember, a notified New Yorker is a prepared New Yorker.
Remember, for more information about New York City government services, dial 311.
This is City Controller Scott Stringer. Your credit score isn't just a number. It's the key to financial freedom. That's why we have a proposal to add rent payments into credit reporting. Making rent count could mean lower bills, cheaper borrowing rates, and higher scores for New Yorkers. To learn more about how to get rent added to your credit score, visit controller.nyc.gov and search for Making Rent Count.
My name is John Leguizamo. I grew up in Queens, Jackson Heights, Corona, and Astoria Boulevard. And my profession is actor, writer, producer, animated voice. Well, I think the importance of the PSI alumni is to help kids and to remind them how important education is. Join me and other alumni at psalumni.nyc. Become part of the first citywide public alumni network. Help support the next generation of New Yorkers.
Remember, for more information about New York City government services, dial 311 or visit nyc.gov.
This is HPD Commissioner Maria Torres Springer. Heat season starts October 1st, and the indoor temperature must be at least 62 degrees overnight, regardless of the outdoor temperature. During the day, if it falls below 55 degrees, it should be 68 degrees inside. If heat isn't being provided, call the property owner. If it's not fixed fast, call 311. Learn more at nyc.gov/HPD.
Hi, I'm Bita Mostofi, the Acting Commissioner of the Mayor's Office of Immigrant Affairs. Deferred action for childhood arrivals and temporary protected status are crucial protections for many immigrant New Yorkers, but the Trump administration has put these programs at risk. If you or someone you love have questions about DACA, TPS, or other immigration matters, call 311 and say Action NYC for a free and confidential legal screening. To learn more, visit nyc.gov/immigrants.
Remember, for more information about New York City government services, dial 311.
Hi, I'm Roy Mogolansky, Executive Director of the City of New York Office of Payroll Administration. City employees, did you know that when you sign up for the WageWorks Commuter Benefits Program, you'll save money on your commute to work by having funds set aside from your paycheck before taxes are taken out? So you'll pay less in taxes, up to $1,200 a year if you take mass transit alone, and up to $2,400 if parking is part of your commute. Visit getwageworks.com/NYC.
Police officers should always treat you with respect. I'm Jonathan Darsh, Executive Director of the Civilian Complaint Review Board. The CCRB independently investigates, mediates, and prosecutes complaints of police misconduct. If you, or someone you know, has faced misconduct, file a complaint now. Learn how at nyc.gov/CCRB complaint.
Remember, for more information about New York City government services, dial 311 or visit nyc.gov.
What's up, guys? I'm Prince Royce. Join me and other alumni at psalumni.nyc. PS alumni is important because these are the people that are able to make it, and they were able to go through, through high school, through college, get jobs, and are able to kind of connect with those kids that are struggling with obstacles and maybe don't know what they want to be when they grow up. So I think that PS alumni is definitely important to have people that can really connect with these kids that are going through what all of us go through in high school.
Hi, I'm Marisa Lago, Director of the New York City Department of City Planning. Are you one of the 400,000 New Yorkers who lives in the floodplain? If so, the Department of City Planning wants to hear from you. We're working with residents of flood-prone coastal communities to create special zoning regulations that will make your neighborhood more resilient. Watch our video and then share your ideas at nyc.gov/resilient neighborhoods.
Remember, for more information about New York City government services, dial 311.
Hi, I'm Eric Landau, president of Brooklyn Bridge Park. Join us on the beautiful Brooklyn waterfront, where you can kayak along the river, shoot hoops on Pier 2, barbecue at the Picnic Peninsula, ride the historic Jane's Carousel, or just take a leisurely walk through the park. Brooklyn Bridge Park has something for everyone. And there's more to come next summer when we open Pier 3, the final pier to be converted into parkland. For more information, call 311 or visit brooklynbridgepark.org. See you in the park.
I'm City Controller Scott Stringer. An honest day's work deserves an honest day's pay. And if you work for a contractor on a city construction or building services project, you should be getting paid the prevailing wage. If you think you've been underpaid, call my Bureau of Labor Law at 212-669-4443. All calls will be kept confidential, and we'll fight to get you the money you're owed, regardless of immigration status.
Remember, for more information about New York City government services, dial 311 or visit nyc.gov.
Hola, soy la comisionada Lorelei Salas del Departamento de Asuntos del Consumidor. Si en el año pasado usted ganó $66,000 o menos, puede declarar sus impuestos con nuestro servicio gratuito de Free Tax Prep y recuperar el total de su reembolso. Llame hoy al 311 o visite la página de Free Tax Prep en el sitio web de la ciudad, nyc.gov/taxprep.
I'm Mark Benjamin, a comedian here in New York City. Folks, winters are no laughing matter. The extreme cold and heavy snow and ice can be very dangerous. I always make sure I bundle up with layers, a hat, scarf, and gloves before I head out into the cold. For tips on how you can prepare, visit nyc.gov/emergency management or call 311. And don't forget to sign up for Notify NYC to get free emergency alerts. Stay safe this winter.
Remember, for more information about New York City government services, dial 311 or visit nyc.gov.
Hi, I'm Department of Consumer Affairs Commissioner Lorelei Salas. Did you earn $66,000 or less last year? You can file your taxes for free with NYC Free Tax Prep and keep your entire refund. Call 311 or visit nyc.gov/taxprep to learn about trusted professional filing with NYC Free Tax Prep.
Hi, I'm Joe Esposito, Commissioner at New York City Emergency Management. Be the first to know when an emergency happens with Notify NYC. Get the free app today for your Apple or Android device. You can also visit nyc.gov/notifynyc. Call 311 or follow @NotifyNYC on Twitter. Remember, a notified New Yorker is a prepared New Yorker.
Remember, for more information about New York City government services, dial 311.
This is City Controller Scott Stringer. Your credit score isn't just a number. It's the key to financial freedom. That's why we have a proposal to add rent payments into credit reporting. Making rent count could mean lower bills, cheaper borrowing rates, and higher scores for New Yorkers. To learn more about how to get rent added to your credit score, visit controller.nyc.gov and search for Making Rent Count.
My name is John Leguizamo. I grew up in Queens, Jackson Heights, Corona, and Astoria Boulevard. And my profession is actor, writer, producer, animated voice. Well, I think the importance of the PSI alumni is to help kids and to remind them how important education is. Join me and other alumni at psalumni.nyc. Become part of the first citywide public alumni network. Help support the next generation of New Yorkers.
Remember, for more information about New York City government services, dial 311 or visit nyc.gov.
This is HPD Commissioner Maria Torres Springer. Heat season starts October 1st, and the indoor temperature must be at least 62 degrees overnight, regardless of the outdoor temperature. During the day, if it falls below 55 degrees, it should be 68 degrees inside. If heat isn't being provided, call the property owner. If it's not fixed fast, call 311. Learn more at nyc.gov/HPD.
Hi, I'm Bita Mostofi, the Acting Commissioner of the Mayor's Office of Immigrant Affairs. Deferred action for childhood arrivals and temporary protected status are crucial protections for many immigrant New Yorkers, but the Trump administration has put these programs at risk. If you or someone you love have questions about DACA, TPS, or other immigration matters, call 311 and say Action NYC for a free and confidential legal screening. To learn more, visit nyc.gov/immigrants.
Remember, for more information about New York City government services, dial 311.
Hi, I'm Roy Mogolansky, Executive Director of the City of New York Office of Payroll Administration. City employees, did you know that when you sign up for the WageWorks Commuter Benefits Program, you'll save money on your commute to work by having funds set aside from your paycheck before taxes are taken out? So you'll pay less in taxes, up to $1,200 a year if you take mass transit alone, and up to $2,400 if parking is part of your commute. Visit getwageworks.com/NYC.
Police officers should always treat you with respect. I'm Jonathan Darsh, Executive Director of the Civilian Complaint Review Board. The CCRB independently investigates, mediates, and prosecutes complaints of police misconduct. If you, or someone you know, has faced misconduct, file a complaint now. Learn how at nyc.gov/CCRB complaint.
Remember, for more information about New York City government services, dial 311 or visit nyc.gov.
What's up, guys? I'm Prince Royce. Join me and other alumni at psalumni.nyc. PS alumni is important because these are the people that are able to make it, and they were able to go through, through high school, through college, get jobs, and are able to kind of connect with those kids that are struggling with obstacles and maybe don't know what they want to be when they grow up. So I think that PS alumni is definitely important to have people that can really connect with these kids that are going through what all of us go through in high school.
Hi, I'm Marisa Lago, Director of the New York City Department of City Planning. Are you one of the 400,000 New Yorkers who lives in the floodplain? If so, the Department of City Planning wants to hear from you. We're working with residents of flood-prone coastal communities to create special zoning regulations that will make your neighborhood more resilient. Watch our video and then share your ideas at nyc.gov/resilient neighborhoods.
Remember, for more information about New York City government services, dial 311.
Hi, I'm Eric Landau, President of Brooklyn Bridge Park. Join us on the beautiful Brooklyn waterfront, where you can kayak along the river, shoot hoops on Pier 2, Barbecue at the Picnic Peninsula, ride the historic Jane's Carousel, or just take a leisurely walk through the park. Brooklyn Bridge Park has something for everyone. And there's more to come next summer when we open Pier 3, the final pier to be converted into parkland. For more information, call 311 or visit brooklynbridgepark.org. See you in the park.
Hello there.
Good morning. My name is Reverend Raymond Rivera. Welcome to the Latino Pastoral Action Center, the Urban Ministry Complex. We're excited today to host the mayor and the First Lady in this new initiative. Let me just say that the history of heroin and opiates is well known in our communities, particularly in the South Bronx. This historical context has always been a problem in our communities, particularly communities of color. But this recent opiate crisis has intensified that problem, and we have felt the impact in a significant way here in our community. Right in my parish, there are several people that have been addicted to drugs and even have overdosed. In my situation, I see that this has impacted in such a way that it's also increased heroin use, because heroin becomes a cheaper substitute for opiate drugs, and it's just caused so much pain and devastation in our community. The faith community has a history of dealing with this problem, and also I'm excited that now we're going to have this intensified initiative being launched today. The city has been doing work all along. This is just intensifying the effort and coordinating the effort in a more comprehensive way. Let me just end by saying that this is very personal to me. My own daughter, after being a functional adult and a great mother, got involved in prescription drug addiction, and she told me to share this. I asked her permission, and she even overdosed in front of her children, and now 6 years, 5 to 6 years have passed, and she's totally recovered, working in Richmond, Virginia, and she's working now with girls that are going through that same problem. So I want to say to people out there, that a change is possible, that this does not discriminate. It can be the daughter that grew up in church. It could be the daughter and son of a lawyer, of a judge. It can be the most grassroots person. It impacts the whole community, and we have to unite our efforts to confront this problem in a more significant way. And now I want to introduce a woman who's made it her mission to make it easier to fight this disease of addiction in our communities and for our communities to recover. I'm honored to introduce the First Lady of our city, Shirlane McKay.
I want to thank you, Reverend Rivera, for sharing your family's story. I know it's very painful, but we're very pleased that she is on the path to recovery. And thank you for all the work that you're doing to help our communities heal. And thank you all for joining us today. All over our city, people are hurting from this crisis. There are mothers, fathers, daughters, sons, sisters, brothers, partners, and friends who struggle every day with opioid use. And there are many, many people who have lost loved ones to this deadly epidemic. A few months ago, I helped honor a group of extraordinary people, all of whom have saved a life, or in some cases, many lives using naloxone, the medication that reverses opioid overdose. Some of the folks we honored use opioids themselves or they have in the past. But they all love and care about people who use opioids. Some are peer workers who are working hard every day to manage their own addiction, and they're also dedicating their lives to helping others navigate the long and difficult path to recovery. They came from different walks of life, were of different ethnicities, and even spoke several different languages. When they used naloxone in a time of urgency, all of them became life-saving heroes. Not because they wanted to, but because they had to. No one else was going to save the people that they love. And because they understand what our society has been too slow to grasp, addiction is a chronic disease. And the people suffering need our help and support, not our judgment. Una adicción es una enfermedad crónica. La gente que sufre de adicciones necesita nuestro apoyo o ayuda, no ser juzgados o castigados. For me, participating in such a joyous celebration of life amidst so much tragedy was an incredibly powerful experience, and I want to share one story from that day. Before the awards were given, a minister came up to deliver a non-denominational invocation. She asked for a moment of reflection and contemplation, but not of silence. Instead, she asked the audience to say the names of the people they had lost to addiction and to hold them close throughout the ceremony. It started slowly with a single name being called out from the back corner of the room, then another, and soon everyone in the auditorium was speaking the name of someone all at once, some in shouts, some in whispers. Even as they fight to save the living, they carry the ones they lost with them everywhere they go. When we talk about opioids, addiction, and overdose deaths, it is much too easy to lose sense of the people who have fallen victim to this epidemic. They have families and friends, many of whom are here today with us. They have goals and dreams. When we lose them, the people they leave behind are never the same. Our communities are never the same. And when we throw the label addict on a person, we strip them of their humanity with that single word. When we think of substance misuse as a moral failing, when we think people wouldn't use drugs if they just had a little more discipline, we contribute to a culture that makes it even harder to get better. People are so much more than their disease. They are so much more than their struggles. Just imagine if we treated asthma as a character flaw. Imagine how we would react if pharmaceutical companies heavily pushed drugs known to give people diabetes. That's why we're taking action today. And it's why New York City has been leading a comprehensive public health response to this public health emergency. Last spring, we launched Healing NYC with one goal: to save lives. It's early yet, but we are showing signs of progress. This year, we are on track to distribute 100,000 kits of naloxone, literally getting the tools to save a life in the hands of the people who need it most. We're training providers in primary care clinics and emergency rooms to prescribe buprenorphine, one of the most effective medications to treat opioid addiction. We've also taken aim at the stigma that surrounds addiction and many of the most effective treatments out there, which prevents countless people from getting the help that they need. Our public awareness campaigns, which you've seen examples of today, are reaching millions of New Yorkers. And through Thrive NYC, we are addressing the root causes of addiction and the mental illness that often go hand in hand with substance misuse. That means working to change our culture of shaming and punishment to one of healing and wellness, and acting early in our schools and even in our pre-K programs. It means bringing treatment to the communities that need it most, because while mental illness and addiction are challenges shared by everyone, they are not shared equally. And because the federal government has so far refused to do its part in our communities, With Cities Thrive, we are leading nearly 200 other cities in an effort to advocate for Congress to appropriate increased funding so our communities get the support we need to turn the tide of this deadly epidemic. I want anyone looking for support to manage their addiction or help a loved one with theirs to know this. You can call 1-888-NYC-WELL, and I'll repeat that number, 1-888-NYC-WELL at any time of day or night. A trained counselor can talk with you and connect you to a treatment that you need today or help you find a place to pick up naloxone. Si usted o un ser querido tiene un problema de adicción, llame a cualquier hora al 311 y pida que la conecten con NYC Well. And to all the people in our city struggling with opioid use and all those who worry every second of every day, waiting with bated breath for bad news, we care about you and your loved ones. We stand with you, and we will fight for you for justice, treatment, and support. And now it is my pleasure to introduce someone who is leading that fight every day, my partner in all things, Mayor Bill de Blasio.
Thank you so much, Charlene, and I appreciate deeply the passion with which you speak about this, because we have to be very, very clear about the human cost. And we have to be very clear about the fact that the stigma that attaches to addiction is one of the things we have to fight every day. And I want to thank you because I think just by stepping forward as First Lady of this city and changing the discussion, you're helping so many more people get to the treatment they need. It's really changing what families talk about, what people talk about in communities, and it's making a big, big difference. Let's thank our First Lady for that. This is an important day because this city is going to tackle this issue head on in a lot of different ways, including going at the perpetrators of this crime, going at those who started this horrible epidemic. And I'll talk about how we're going to do that in a moment. But I also want to recognize people who, despite this huge, huge challenge, have found a way to fight back through their extraordinary actions. The public servants behind me share many things in common. They're all first responders. They're all heroes in this city because of what they do every day. But they're especially heroes because every single one of them has used naloxone to save a life in this city. Let's thank them. I want to thank Reverend Ray Rivera not only for welcoming us, but for telling us that powerful story of his own daughter. And there are so many New Yorkers who could tell you their own story. But when a leader in the community like Reverend Rivera comes forward, it makes a huge difference. I thank you, and I thank your daughter as well for your openness to help people understand what it takes to fight this challenge and that it can be overcome. But also, Reverend Rivera has been one of the great faith leaders in the city in terms of bringing faith communities together to have a bigger impact on the needs of the people of this city. He's led the way on a whole host of issues, and it's really especially an honor to be with him on this day. Thank you, Reverend Rivera, for all you do. Want to thank our colleagues in the City Council who have been front and center on this issue and great partners. Want to acknowledge them. The new chair of the Health Committee in the City Council, Councilmember Mark Levine, thank you. The new chair of the Committee on Mental Health, Councilmember Diana Ayala, thank you. And she's not old, but she has already represented her district. She continues to represent this district. Councilmember Vanessa Gibson, thank you. I want to thank our colleagues in law enforcement who are such a big part of this equation, and they have been leaders on the whole fight against the opioid epidemic, not just from a law enforcement angle, but thinking about how to reach people in communities on so many ways. You're going to hear from a couple of them in a moment, but I also want to acknowledge the Assistant DA of the Bronx, Derek Linton, and the Assistant DA of Queens, Robert Ciesla. Thank you so much. And want to thank for his leadership and his entire team, because we're going to talk about the legal action that we're taking today, again, against those who created this crisis. I want to thank our Corporation Counsel and everyone at the Law Department. Thank you, Zach Carter. Where are you? There you are. Thank you, Zach. And a special thank you, our partners in so much of what we're doing in fighting the opioid epidemic. Representing the NYPD, Deputy Commissioner Susan Herman, representing FDNY, Deputy Assistant Chief Alvin Suriel. So, when we think about the work we do as public servants, the first thing is to save lives and protect lives. Here's a stark fact. Last year in New York City, more New Yorkers died of overdoses than died of homicides and traffic fatalities combined. That is how bad this crisis has become. And as everyone who's watched it knows, in just the last couple of years, largely due to the greater presence of fentanyl, the crisis has grown. We know that most of those overdoses, overwhelmingly those overdoses, are because of opioids. We know fentanyl has been a particular deadly part of the equation. And we've got to do more all the time to address the crisis. But again, we have to go to the root causes of it as well. This crisis, as my wife said and as Reverend Rivera said, it does not discriminate. It is across every conceivable boundary. By the way, it's all across this country. Urban areas, rural areas, wealthy communities, poor communities, white communities, black communities, Latino communities, Asian communities. It is a national tragedy. It needs a national solution, but we haven't seen that yet. And we can't stand still. Charlene laid out a lot of the key components governing our work. And it takes everything from prevention on the front end, trying to stop the problem before it happens, to being able to address the situation on an emergency basis and save a life. And we can see that new approaches and new investments are starting to make an impact. A lot more we got to do, but we see the beginning of change. Dr. Blasio will go over that in just a moment. But while we're trying here in this city to find solutions, and so many other cities and towns and counties around the country are trying to do the same, who's getting away with bloody murder right now? The big pharmaceutical companies. That's what's really going on. The people who created the crisis are getting away with it. They are not only not paying for what they have done, they're continuing to do what they started. They haven't changed. And when you think about it, how cynical it is, big pharma hooked millions of Americans on these drugs, deceived the people, and the human cost has been inestimable. At the same time, they made billions of dollars in the process. Now, Charlene said something that really caught my attention because I hadn't thought of that until she said it. When she said, what if they were creating a drug that cause diabetes? Well, not only would that be the comparison between something physical, which obviously people have an easier time acknowledging and talking about, versus a mental health or a substance misuse challenge, but here's the other piece of the equation. The cynicism in the drug industry was knowing that they were fostering addiction and knowing that it was hard for people to come forward who were addicted. They were fostering addiction and knowing society had trouble acknowledging the problem. What a perfectly cynical plan to make billions off of something that was hard to bring out in the open and that too often remained in the shadows. That's what happened. So it's simple. It's time for Big Pharma to pay for what they have done. It's time for them to be held accountable. Today, we filed a lawsuit in state court, and we are seeking over $500 million in damages from these corporate drug pushers. We need to change the trajectory. We cannot allow the status quo to continue. Those that created the problem have to feel the consequences and have to change their ways and have to finally help address the damage they have done. The suit targets 7 manufacturers and 3 distributors who are most responsible for creating this crisis. And you don't need to be an expert to understand what they did. I'm going to lay it out in 3 simple steps. This is what the big pharmaceutical companies did. They took a playbook that they had already seen the big tobacco companies use. So step 1, they ignored all the scientific evidence that made clear their product was lethal. Step 2, they went out of their way to get our society more addicted on their product every single day. And step 3, they raked in billions of dollars in profit while they're doing step 1 and step 2. But here's a fact. Prescription opioid sales in the United States quadrupled from 1999 to 2014, according to the Centers for Disease Control. At the peak point in 2012, there were 282 million prescriptions written for opioids in the United States, enough for every adult American to have their own bottle of pills. Think about how systematic that effort was to convince doctors and patients alike to prescribe and overprescribe to the tune of 282 million prescriptions in a single year. Why were these companies so callous? Because they were making so much money. They were making record profits, in fact. One company, Purdue, released a version of OxyContin in 1995, has had $35 billion in sales since. McKesson had $4 billion in opioid sales last year alone. 1 year. And here's what's happened to human beings. We now have an opioid epidemic based on what these companies did. 4 in 5 heroin users nationally started with prescription painkillers. And then so many move to heroin because it's cheaper and they continue what could be a lifetime of addiction. And all of us here, including so many people in this room who have been a part of this fight against the opioid epidemic, everyone is left to pick up the pieces. And I just want to take a moment, because I know there's a lot of people in this room who have labored in the vineyards, including when this issue wasn't getting the attention it deserved, who have fought to save lives, who have stood up even if they've lost loved ones. Please applaud your neighbors, because you all have done something so good. So this is a health emergency if we've ever seen one. And the human cost is what matters the most but I assure you there's an economic cost as well. This city alone is spending over $500 million a year to address the opioid epidemic. $500 million. When you think about all of the things that the Health Department, that the Health and Hospitals Corporation, NYPD, FDNY, Corrections, just to name 5 agencies of many more, all the things they have to do to address addiction, to try and stop addiction, to deal with the results of addiction, to deal with the lifetime needs of those who have been addicted, the cost is staggering. So it's time for these pharmaceutical companies to forfeit some of their ill-gotten gains and send them where they could actually help us address the problem they created. We will continue our efforts, even though we don't have all the resources we need. But if we had some relief, if we had some help, we could do so much more. When we prevail in this lawsuit, Zach, when we prevail, we will use the proceeds to reach so many more people, to stop so many more people from becoming addicted, to catch addiction at the very beginning and turn lives around, to save more and more lives with naloxone and other measures. We need that help to reach so many more people. Also, the power of the lawsuit is it will change behavior. First of all, we would like it to change the behavior of the companies. We'd like them to stop promoting the overuse of their dangerous drugs. And we think this lawsuit will have a powerful impact. It also helps change public attitudes. We saw this with the tobacco lawsuits. They were part of what changed the assumptions around America about tobacco use and about what could be done to stop it. So we believe this lawsuit will have a big and lasting impact in terms of turning the tide on this epidemic. And we know one thing for sure, the status quo is unacceptable. Every day we lose 3 to 4 New Yorkers to overdoses. Again, more than murders, more than traffic fatalities, it's unacceptable. We will keep addressing it with every tool we have, but we also want to address it at the root, in the boardrooms of those companies who did this to all of us. A few words in Spanish. Hoy demandamos a las empresas farmacéuticas más responsables por la epidemia de opioides. Estas empresas promovieron medicinas muy adictivas para sacar grandes beneficios, aunque conocían el peligro que suponen. Vamos a pedir que rindan cuentas y compensan el enorme daño que han causado a Nueva York y los neoyorquinos. With that, I have a very important introduction to make. And there's nothing more painful than talking to a mother who has lost her child. And in this case, lost her son, Christopher, to opioids. It is very, very difficult, I know, for any parent to live with that. And it's very difficult to talk about it. But it's very admirable when a parent comes forward to save the lives of others. And that's exactly what's happening right here, right now. Anne-Marie Parado, thank you and welcome.
Thank you, Mayor de Blasio. I'm honored to be here with you today. I'm going to be really blunt. The pharmaceutical companies killed my son. And it's about damn time we started holding them accountable. My son, Christopher, was a straight-A student. He was an athlete, and we used to call him Hurricane Chris. Then he was 19, and he was in a car accident that caused a minor back injury. He could have taken Tylenol. Instead, he was given prescription opioids. Christopher was addicted within a week. He went from 1 to 2 pills a day to 3 to 4 pills a day, then to 10 to 12 pills a day, and then to 25 to 30 pills a day. This wasn't my son I knew, and it wasn't the man he wanted to be. Christopher told me once that the opiates were like a demon lurking in the back of his head. I realized I was watching my son die, and I didn't know how to stop it or what to do. Everywhere I went, I was looked at as I was a criminal, or my son was a criminal, because he was a drug addict. That's what they said. And no matter how much I begged for somebody to help me, it was very difficult. My son was 22 when he passed away in 2011. I take him to the ER, and they ask him how much pain he was in on a level 1 to 10. I bet everyone here heard that. He quickly learned that he could go to the emergency room for more opiates. I'd send him back to rehab, but once he'd come back to a sea of pills on Staten Island. Every other house had them in their medicine cabinet. 2011, heroin wasn't out yet, so my son died from the prescription drug opiates. We made progress since then on funding treatment, on raising awareness, on breaking down the stigma of addiction, and it's thanks to our mayor and the First Lady, and also the efforts of our governor and the state, our DA's office, the health department, everyone that I've worked with, Donna Mae DePola. I want to thank you because I'm doing this because it's my heart. And this means more than anything for me, that I said in the beginning when Christopher died, and everybody said, oh, that's a fat chance of you going after the pharmaceutical companies. But this is what started the epidemic. This is what started killing our loved ones. I am grateful for all that you're doing on the issues of addiction. And I'm happy for the actions that are being taken today. Thank you. I am also happy that the governor and the state are going after drug companies and support taxing their drugs to pay for the havoc they are still causing. I hate public speaking. I'm a nervous wreck, as you all probably could see. But I'm up here because I'm going to make sure that I finish the journey my son started me on before I see him again. That means going after not just the drug dealers on the street, but the drug dealers in the office towers.
Beautiful.
You know, I speak at some of the district attorney's events and Donna Mae DePola's trainings, and you know what I say to the people that I speak to, the kids in the audience, and whether they were drug dealers doing it for their addiction or if they were addicted. I said, if I said this was a cancer in a pill, would you sell it or buy it? Because that's exactly what it is. It's going to kill you. And then I started on the front line, and I opened Christopher's Reason on Staten Island. And I worked very closely with Mike McMahon. And Donna Mae DePola is the president. And I'm front line with my family, I call them. And we need help. We need help. It's a nonprofit. We need help to keep the treatment going. We need help to support these families. And in Christopher's memory, I have to dedicate myself to making sure that they don't get away with killing my son, other people's sons, daughters, and loved ones. And I want to thank you so much.
Well, you may have felt like a nervous wreck, but that was incredibly eloquent, incredible. Give her another round of applause. And thank you. And I know what you're doing is going to save lives and is saving lives right now. Thank you so much, Anne-Marie. To tell you about what is happening in this city, how we are trying every day to reach more and more people in need, our Deputy Mayor, Dr. Herminia Blasio.
Thank you very much, Mayor, and thank you, First Lady, for your incredible leadership, not just passion, but compassion in this effort for each and every soul that has been affected by this epidemic. Thank you, Reverend Rivera, for welcoming back again to this location, a place where he has welcomed me on more than one occasion, and which has always a special place in my heart as I grew up just 10 blocks due east of here. I want to acknowledge my colleagues who are here with me, Dr. Mitchell Katz, our President and CEO of New York Health and Hospitals, Dr. Oxiris Barbo, our First Deputy for the Department of Health and Mental Hygiene, and Dr. Hillary Cunnins, Assistant Commissioner for Department of Health and Mental Hygiene. We heard a lot today about individuals and names. And thank you so much for sharing your incredible story. Mayor, you began by comparing this scourge to the deaths by car accidents and homicides. I have not lost a child, thank God, but my mother did. At 12 years old, my brother Angel, about 10 blocks from here, was killed by a car accident, killed by a car 10 years ago. I understand just the pain that that leaves the family, not just a mom, but an entire family forever. My mom did not have to speak of the car accident in a society that made her feel guilty about her son being hit by a car. My mom did not have to speak in a society that made her feel guilty about her son crossing the street. So I thank you for coming forward today and lifting your voices for all of the moms and dads who say, we have nothing to be ashamed of. This is a chronic condition. The mayor and the first lady have charged us with every tool to reduce the number of overdoses and save lives. But overdose deaths are still at epidemic levels, with the powerful synthetic opioid fentanyl driving these deaths. Overdose deaths here in New York City jumped 17% from 2014 to 15, and then jumped 50% from 2015 to 16. Fentanyl was involved in almost half of those deaths. But now in 2017, we're seeing that first glimmer of hope, that light shining through the cracks. We're seeing data that tell us that we're beginning to turn the tide. From 2016 to 2017, we expect a flattening of that curve, not another spike. We expect the number of overdose deaths to be roughly even year over year. That's good news, but we have so much work to do. Unfortunately, we have many tools at our disposal. We have effective treatments, we have policy, we have collaboration, we have people lifting their voices. and we have data to guide us. So I want to give you a brief update on what we have accomplished since launching Healing NYC last March. As you've heard from the First Lady, we are on track to distributing 100,000 naloxone kits this year. And since launching Healing NYC, we've administered naloxone nearly 10,000 times. You can bear witness to some of the individuals who've administered naloxone, who've reached people right at the point of death and saved them. We're transforming the way we respond to overdose survivors when they are in the emergency room. We now have trained peers, people with lived experience with opioid addiction, helping these survivors at this critical moment of intervention, helping them begin that first step towards treatment and services. We've launched these peer teams at 7 emergency departments in the Bronx, Brooklyn, Manhattan, and Staten Island. We are making New York City Health and Hospitals a system of excellence across the entire city when it comes to the treatment of opioid use disorders. And we're widening the availability of medication-assisted treatment. This includes the use of buprenorphine and methadone, effective, proven treatment for opioid addiction. And as you see, we're running several campaigns to inform people to help the First Lady's Thrive initiative continue to reduce the stigma, to reduce the prejudice against people with substance use disorders, and also to reduce the stigma that has pervaded our society about effective treatments that hold people back from coming forward and saying, I need help, that sometimes make people feel guilty about getting help so that they stop getting the help and put themselves at risk from by stopping their medications. We have campaigns to warn people about fentanyl and how it's being cut at multiple levels, from dealer, in pills, in heroin, where people who are using opioids don't even know how much fentanyl there is. And we're providing guidance on where you can get naloxone. So New Yorkers should feel good about the steps that we're taking and emboldened to continue to march forward. Through Healing NYC, we are taking urgent steps to prevent opioid overdose deaths in our city. We're headed in the right direction, but we have so much work to do because every single death from opioids is a preventable death. Every single death. Con esta demanda, las compañías farmacéuticas, nosotros tomarán otro paso más en esta lucha contra las sobredosis. Gracias.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Blasio, and thank you for your heartfelt words. And I know this is a labor of love for you and your team as you fight this epidemic. 2 more people I want you to hear from, and law enforcement plays a crucial role, but as I said in the beginning, these 2 law enforcement leaders have taken that role and stretched it to much deeper engagement with the community to help address this epidemic. First, I'd like you to hear from the District Attorney of Staten Island, Mike McMahon.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and First Lady and Pastor Rivera and Deputy Mayor and Corporation Counsel, my newly installed colleague with an incredible wide and deep career in law enforcement, Eric Gonzalez, and everyone here at the table, the City Council members, and especially Anne-Marie for your words. As you heard from Anne-Marie, and as you may have seen in the media, this is a problem, a crisis that we feel like we're on the front lines out in Staten Island. In fact, we don't call it a crisis or a problem, even an epidemic anymore. It's really become a plague for us, if you will. Every day, at least 1, if not 2 Staten Islanders succumbs to an overdose. In 2016, we had one of the highest per capita death rates per 100,000 as calculated in the country. It's an extreme problem, and it is one that faces every family from the North Shore to the South Shore, rich, poor, black, white, or brown, or ages, doesn't matter, it's everywhere. But it's also one that I'm happy to report from Staten Island that we've really done a lot about, and that's only because of the partners who are here with us in this room today. We started early to get naloxone into the hands of our police and EMS responders. You'll notice it's not all about Staten Island today, but it is a lot. Captain Bracken and that whole team of EMS responders are from Staten Island because they've responded so often to save lives. We've also worked to develop the Overdose Response Initiative, which investigates and follows up on each overdose with our partners in the NYPD. We started a community campaign to wipe away the stigma. We call it sihope.org. There's a website you can go to. And in the true Staten Island fashion, we put out lawn signs, because in Staten Island we love our lawn signs, trying to rally the community to remove the stigma and put together to fight this scourge, this plague. We are in the schools doing education, as you heard from Anne Marie. And we're very proud that this is the one-year anniversary of our HOPE program, which is a post-arrest pre-arraignment diversion program. Over 340 people have been offered that program, and instead of getting a misdemeanor conviction for personal possession, they've been connected with services. They're met at the precinct by a peer counselor. They're given naloxone training, and they are encouraged to actively engage in some sort of positive path that allows us then to remove those charges, and they move forward. And many of these programs have now been duplicated throughout the city of New York, and we're very proud of that. But one of the things that's really riled us, it really has driven us crazy out in Staten Island, is the fact that, as the mayor said, I think it was, that 80% of the people who we deal with, whether it's from overdose saves or not, fatalities, we already had 6 fatalities this year alone in 2018, that everyone, the 80% started down this terrible path with prescription pills. And it is infuriating. It's maddening that we as a society could allow ourselves to get into this position where we have preventable deaths caused by the corporate greed of big pharma, the distributors, and some of the retailers. And so that's why I'm thrilled, really, as a Staten Islander and as a district attorney, that the mayor and the Corporation Council and everyone here is pulling together to say to big pharma that this is enough, and we are going to take a stand against you and get this word out there. And what did big pharma, big pharma, what do they care about? They care about sales, right? And the bottom line, the top dollar, the corporate returns. And what were they selling? They sold lies. They told people that you got to manage your pain, and you got to take these pills, and you got to take them. And you hear the story about Christopher Parado, a young man. You hear about a star athlete from Tottenville High School who got hurt on the playing field and got hurt his shoulder, got addicted and overdosed and died. Sanitation workers who were lied to when they were hurt on the job. Firefighters, police officers, typical average New Yorkers who were just going about their business of life. Young people, old people were told by a medical community that was lied to by big pharma, and look where we are. And they were not only selling lies, they were selling poison. Poison that were leading people to an addiction. Doesn't take rocket science to know that opioids are addictive. I know it, you know it, yet somehow they sold this poison through their lies, and now they've reaped these billions of dollars of profit. And they were selling death. Thousands and thousands of New Yorkers, tens of thousands of Americans who have died because of these lies and because of their actions. And so I am proud to sit here today with this team, and I thank the mayor, and I thank the Corporation Council and the First Lady and everyone here, because it's time that we go after big pharma. It's time that we say it's enough with the lies and the poison and the death, and it's time that we turn this around. I just wanted to leave you with one good note, as the Deputy Mayor said, that we saw last year on the initial data that at least death rates are down on Staten Island. We've started to bend the curve, we think, with initial data by 26%. But guess what? We still had 375 overdoses, and that's way too many. And the people who have caused this problem need to be held accountable, and I'm proud to be here today, and I thank the mayor and everyone who's doing this. On behalf of Staten Island, thank you.
Thank you. And I want to give a special appreciation to Mike because he made this a focal point issue. And one of the reasons that we saw fewer deaths in Staten Island in 2017 than 2016 was because the DA aggressively pursued this issue and created some of the initiatives that made a difference. So let's give Mike another round of applause for that. Finally, I want you to hear from a man I was honored to be part of your swearing in. And you have just gotten started, but you are going to be doing amazing things on this and so many other fronts. The DA of my beloved Brooklyn, Eric Gonzalez.
Thank you, Mayor. Reverend Rivera, thank you for having us today. To our First Lady, your words inspired my efforts. To everyone else here on the dais, thank you. Listen, the rationale for this lawsuit is simple. And this health crisis was caused by deceptive practices by Big Pharma that misled the public about how addictive their products are. And our message back is you must now help pay for the damage you caused in our communities. And to be clear, as the mayor said, there's been significant costs in terms of law enforcement, police costs, investigation, costs for drug treatment and medical care and hospitalizations, unfortunate costs of prosecution and incarceration. The opioid crisis has also been a safety issue, as some of unscrupulous individuals take advantage of addiction and sell their poison, heroin, and fentanyl. And you know, people seeking their need for the opiate then overdose and die. And so we have to have creative ways of dealing with this. You know, I want to take the moment again to acknowledge what Mike McMahon did in Staten Island. And in Brooklyn, we're going to be doing the same, working with Susan Herman and the police department. We're going to treat addiction for the first time in Brooklyn history as a health issue and not as a crime. You know, and it comes from a really long history of the mistakes that we've made in the past, in the 80s and 90s. We put many, many Black and Latino men in jail for addiction issues. So we've learned from those mistakes. In my commitment to helping close Rikers Island, no one who's addicted to drugs should ever spend a day on Rikers Island. Right. So we're going to be doing this in Brooklyn. We're starting very soon with what we've been calling in Brooklyn, Brooklyn Clear, but it's a program very similar to HOPE program, which is treating dependency as a health issue, making sure that a person is not criminally charged and does not have to come down to Central Booking or Rikers. And we, in this way, our First Lady, we can help do our part to end the stigmatization of this addiction. So today's lawsuit, I'm very proud to be with all of you and with all the families who have lost a loved one to this deadly disease. Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to take questions on this announcement today and obviously on the larger fight against the opioid epidemic. Then we'll pause because I know some people have to leave after that, and then we'll go to off-topic questions after. So let's take questions first on this. Yes.
Mayor, without taking away the culpability that many people feel pharmaceutical companies have, what about the physicians and medical providers who prescribe this, knowing the risks? I didn't hear as much or really any comment about whether they should be held liable or at least redirected to limit the number of prescriptions that they write out.
Let me say I'll turn to Dr. Blasio and Zach Carter, because I think there's two pieces to that question. One, the efforts to educate the medical community on how to handle appropriate medicines the right way, and then two, the legal question. But I still think what we're trying to get across here is the root cause. The drugs were developed as the dangers became more and more clear. The companies went out of their way to publicly minimize the dangers, to try to lull people to sleep, went out of their way to promote the use and overuse, to keep encouraging doctors and the whole society to feel they needed these drugs even when they didn't. What Anne-Marie said is so powerful that her son well could have gotten through his pain initially with Tylenol, but the corporate complex had hooked everyone, including doctors, on the notion that they should be prescribing this drug. And when they knew of its dangers, rather than saying, wait, we've made a mistake or there's been unintended consequence, they doubled down on promoting the use and overuse of the drug. So that's why we believe they are the root cause. But as to what we're doing otherwise to move the medical community, Dr. Blasio.
Thank you, Mayor, and you have that exactly right. This was a very robust marketing strategy to change prescribing practices based on incomplete and inaccurate information. What we're doing, so New York City has been a leader in actually sort of the counter-marketing, so to speak, and really changing physician prescribing practices with better information. New York City's guidance around physician prescribing actually became the national model for the subsequent CDC guidance around prescriptions, prescribing of opioids. So this is a space that we stepped into very early and very boldly.
This is an epidemic that started with prescription drugs, but as you mentioned, has now kind of moved on to the more heroin, fentanyl, other street drugs. So I understand you're saying you want to penalize these folks for, their conduct that was the root cause. But do you think at this point that changing their behavior can really have any effect since it's mostly moved on to other drugs?
Well, I'll just start again as the layman voice, and Dr. Palacio can weigh in with her expertise. Just because a lot of people have moved on to heroin doesn't mean that new people aren't being hooked every day. That's the problem here. There's a tragic conveyor belt where there's still a lot of overuse of the prescription drugs. What Anne-Marie said is a painful reality that, for so many people, not just young people, the fact that the drugs are available in their neighborhoods, in someone's home, and you've seen the very powerful ads on television, letting people know how often a drug supply gets raided. And we got to get to the root cause here, which is these drugs should not be prescribed the way they are right now and should not be promoted the way they are, because they're still the gateway for a whole lot of people. And of course, there are people who just remain hooked on the opioid, the prescription opioid to begin with. And that was Anne-Marie's point as well. Many move on to heroin. There's still way too many who the problem is they never get off the prescription drug.
That's right, and it's just important to note, this is not a one-tactic strategy, right? New York City has multiple tactics. This is one of them. We are doing many other things to combat this overall epidemic.
Do you think the city city pension fund should divest from some of the pharmaceutical companies that you're saying caused this crisis and profited off it?
We have to look at that for sure. It's not something I've seen the analysis on yet, but it's the same values I'd take in other situations, that we have to look at any situation like that.
Mr. Mayor, this is the second major lawsuit the city's announced this year to combat a major issue the city's confronting. Why this new strategy? What prompted it? And is the city considering, lawsuits against other corporations for other issues that might, is this a new approach the city's adopting?
I don't think it's a paradigm shift. It's, Zach will tell you a little of the history, but these situations like this oftentimes take months or years to develop. That's true certainly of this lawsuit, which has been something the city's been looking at for quite a while as it's progressed nationally. As you heard when we talked about divestment from the fossil fuel companies, that was something we worked on for about 2 years. So I think these ideas are coming to fruition. They only work when we believe there's a viable legal strategy.
Sure. I think because this announcement comes on the heels of our announcement to sue manufacturers in the fossil fuel industry, It appears to be part of a new initiative. I will tell you that really is a coincidence of timing, but we will use the avenue of bringing lawsuits when we think that the lawsuit can have an impact, and particularly when the target is an industry that's causing harm. That's when a lawsuit, particularly one that's national in scope, can have the kind of impact that can cause a change in corporate behavior. And so we will look in an opportunistic way at opportunities to advance the city's interest, bringing lawsuits, but only when it's appropriate and only when we think we can win.
David.
A couple questions, just to follow on something Bridget said. You said to her that the city had been looking at doing a suit as it's progressed nationally. What did you mean by it's progressed nationally?
This is something obviously other localities have been working on. What we did on fossil fuels the other day was different than what was happening around the country. Our lawsuit was very particular. And what we did on divestment, obviously, was definitive and specific in a way other cities and states had not. When it comes to the pharmaceutical companies and opioids, we have watched the progression of other legal actions, trying to decide what would be the right thing for us to do. Zach can explain.
Sure. We are joining a national effort that's in its earliest stages, in its pre-discovery stages, to bring maximum pressure on the pharmaceutical industry in order to get a change of behavior and also to recover the hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars that need to be invested in addressing this crisis, this epidemic around the country. And so it is when you look at the similarities between our attempts to change the behavior of the pharmaceutical companies, it's reminiscent of what was necessary to change the behavior of tobacco companies that engaged in the same kind of deceptive practices in minimizing the dangers of an extraordinarily dangerous, if not deadly, product, and that aggressively marketed and promoted the sale of a dangerous product. So that's we're using a similar approach. It is a long-term approach, as you'll remember. The tobacco suits were a very long slog, consuming many years and lots of resources, but it was worth it because an entire several generations of young people did not become smokers because of the effect of those lawsuits, both the effect on consumers, but also on the effect that it had on government and government regulators. Some of you who may be old-timers like me will remember that cigarettes were freely advertised on television. Yep. I'm sure some of you can remember all the jingles still by heart. Cigarette smoking was thought to be cool as a result of that promotion. But as a result of an intense public education campaign in companion with those lawsuits against cigarette manufacturers, there was intense lobbying in Washington, and as a result, cigarette advertising was forbidden on the public airwaves, and that had a huge impact on the consumption of cigarettes.
10 years ago, or a little more than 10 years ago, the federal government got a guilty plea out of Purdue Pharma, as I'm sure you're aware of, and they paid something like $600 million. And some of the executives there actually pled guilty to charges and paid their own money. But the behavior didn't seem to have changed, or if it changed at all, you're saying wasn't enough. Well, why do you think asking for essentially the same amount now will have a different effect?
Well, actually, we're not asking for, when you think about the fact that we're joining a national effort, all the mayor talked about was what New York City's share would be. And as you point out, that apparently wasn't enough to get the industry's attention. But when you have hundreds of suits around the country demanding similar compensation, that might get their attention. There are law firms that have been specialized in this area, one of whom we retained, that is co-lead counsel both in the coordinated matter pending in Suffolk County, where we expect this case to be consolidated, and also in Chicago. They will kill me if
While
I
he's
can.
looking, let's
I
go
will
to
tell
another
you.
question. Go ahead. Sure.
So studies have shown that states with medical marijuana have lower rates of opioid use. I'm wondering if that's something that you're considering at all as you're fighting this epidemic.
I'll only start by saying hasn't been part of the discussion that I've been in. Obviously, New York State has moved forward on medical marijuana, which I think is a very good thing. But I think the central point here is we need to get to the root cause, and the root cause is that these companies are still promoting the use of addictive drugs even when they're not needed.
The name of the firm is Simmons Hanley Conroy.
I mean, you want to add to that? Or?
No.
Yes, you're right. There is some data that suggests that in states with medical marijuana, there is decreased opioid use, as the mayor has pointed out. New York State is one of those states with medical marijuana use, and but this lawsuit is really about sort of the magnitude of effect in terms of the affecting people and generations across the nation.
Okay, yes, Michael.
Is that the only outside counsel that's being brought in, the law firm you just mentioned before?
That's the law firm that's representing the city.
Okay. And do you have an estimate of how much the lawsuit might cost the city?
Well, it's being done on a contingency fee basis, so it will not cost us anything.
Need to be hit a lot harder.
How does that work exactly? Sorry for my...
Get the microphone closer. Explain contingency to us civilians, Zach.
It means...
You're over there in lawyer corner.
Sure.
Speak English to the rest of us.
Sure. It means that the lawyers will be compensated by receiving a share of the recovery.
So we do not, I'm the non-lawyer here, just to clarify, we don't pay upfront legal costs.
That's correct.
Beyond what it took for the law department to obviously organize our part of the effort, which was nothing compared to the bigger private effort.
That's correct.
Right. Go ahead.
We can't just come out with these drugs. They have to go through the FDA after testing, and the FDA has to approve it. Now, is the FDA part of this lawsuit, and why not if it isn't?
Good question.
All right. The FDA has approved the use of opioids for limited purposes. All right. And it's for short-term use for persons who are suffering the excruciating pain of post-surgical procedures, for the breakthrough pain that's associated with cancer treatment, and for end-of-life palliative care. Now, what all of those treatments, and I defer to the good doctor to correct me if I'm wrong, have in common is that they're short-term uses. But from the point of view of the pharmaceutical industry that's looking to maximize its profit, they'd like to be able to market beyond those scientifically supported short-term uses to broader long-term uses that have never been justified by the science. And so to the extent that these manufacturers aggressively marketed opioids as being suitable for the treatment of long-term chronic pain, that was deliberately misleading for a number of reasons. One, in terms of the effectiveness of opioids diminishes over time. And the only way you can correct for that, to make them effective, is to increase the dosage. The longer you take it, the more likely it is you become addicted. And through deceptive marketing practices, they attempted to persuade, that is the pharmaceutical industry, both doctors and the general patient community, that that risk could be managed, and that's simply not true.
Yeah.
Just wondering whether or not you expect this lawsuit to take as long as the tobacco lawsuit did. That might it drag on for decades with appeals and et cetera, et cetera. How long could it take to be?
Well, hopefully, hopefully, because of what the general public, and the general public includes judges, learned about the lessons learned from the tobacco litigation, it won't take as long to educate the judiciary about the implications of the conduct of the pharmaceutical industry, because it'll seem familiar. They've seen this movie before.
Well said. That was the first sentence you said I understood.
Oh.
Okay. So, other questions on the announcement related to the litigation or anything else related to fighting the opioid epidemic? Media questions, just want to make sure. Way back there, is that a media question? Okay.
What's the name of this Suffolk case, and can you elaborate on the theory of it, please?
There is not a Suffolk case. There are a number of cases that are pending in Suffolk County that are similar, if not identical, to the one we're bringing today. Those cases are brought by other counties in New York State. In order to coordinate discovery, the state court system, as often happens when there are multiple mass tort litigation suits brought, consolidate all of those cases before a single judge so that the discovery can be better managed. And that will happen until discovery is completed and motion practice is completed, and then the cases will be tried in whatever jurisdiction they're brought. In our case, this case was brought in New York County Supreme Court, and ultimately that's where the case will be tried.
Yes, Bridget.
Just to clarify, when you were talking in your opening remarks about the number of opioid deaths, excuse me, and you said, I believe, that there were more opioid deaths than the number of homicides and traffic deaths combined. Was that in reference to 2016?
2017. And 16 and 17 both.
And do you have a number for 2017?
They're still working on the final number. I think we're probably about a month away because of a lot of examination has to be done in each case. But we know enough about it to say that sad reality with assurance. Again, the hopeful sign, we certainly saw real progress on Staten Island. We've seen some progress in the Bronx as well. We think we're starting to turn the tide here, but we need to go much deeper into this effort to be able to say that for sure. David? Oh, I'm sorry, hold on. Juliet, because you didn't get a chance yet. My apologies.
Thank you. So other than the damages that you're seeking, what is exactly do you want the pharmaceutical companies to not do, or to redirect their thinking? What exactly specifically?
I'll start with the layman's version, and my colleagues can give you something more specific. But look, it's, again, this combination of hooking people on a drug, denying the danger, and promoting the overuse, right? So they keep doing that. Remember, if we were sitting here in a city and in a country where no one else was getting hooked on prescription opioids from this day on, we'd be having a different discussion. That's not the truth. Every day people are getting hooked on prescription opioids. Listen to what Anne-Marie said. If they come into your life because of a prescription that never had to happen to begin with, right? One, stop. This is both on the companies and obviously to the medical community. Stop encouraging the use of them where they're not needed. Stop encouraging the overuse. You know, you have the industry only too happy to encourage doctors to give out a 1-month supply or a 2-month supply for something that might only need a couple of days, right? So it's very persistent and systematic that they've gotten people to think they need it. They keep promoting it. They keep pushing it. And if they were being responsible, honestly, their message would be, please don't use our product, except for the most urgent, severe cases. They've done the exact opposite. They've suggested their product is good for every occasion. Again, I'm speaking as a layman, but that's to put it in plain terms. Go ahead, you guys.
I mean, the ultimate objective is to get the pharmaceutical companies to reverse course in the mismarketing of opioids as suitable for long-term use.
So this is more about marketing than necessarily their method of distribution to
The distributors are the distributors are a separate problem. We are suing the distributors because they often had strong indications that given the volume of prescriptions, from certain prescribers, that there was strong reason to believe that these were being diverted for illegal purposes. And so theirs is not on the marketing, theirs is on knowing that the volume could not possibly be justified by legal uses and appropriate uses.
I know Charlene wants to jump in.
I just want to underscore that we all have a role to play in this, that the pharmaceutical companies have, they're killing millions and making billions of dollars. They have to stop producing so many opioids. The distributors have a role to play in not distributing these drugs, but the physicians have a role to play as well. Patients have a role to play. We have to educate people so that they know that they should not take these medications, and certainly not in the quantities that they're being prescribed. And as lay people, as media, we all have to educate people that addiction is a disease, that opioids actually change the brain receptors so that people feel compelled to take more. This is a chronic disease that we can prevent, but we all have a role to play. And we all have to do our part. I encourage anyone who is suffering to call 1-888-NYC-WELL. I encourage people who know people who are using opioids to encourage them to get treatment, to call that number, and also to carry naloxone, because we know that we can reverse someone who has overdosed.
Thank you. David.
So these are legal prescription drugs. What is the city's advice for people who go to the hospital and are prescribed these drugs? Would the city say don't take them?
So I think the advice is to be an informed patient as much as possible, to have a real discussion with your healthcare provider, with your doctor, with your nurse practitioner, with the nurse on the way, with your pharmacist, to really understand what the prescription was for, how it should be taken appropriately, what are some of the other options, and it's really around making sure that the medical community, as with some of the guidelines that we've issued, really thinks carefully about prescribing as fewer drugs in lower doses. It's not that opioids are always inappropriate. They're not always inappropriate. They are a tool. And they are a tool that we should have more robust knowledge about both the potential benefits and the potential risks. We should have much more open discussion about the potential risks. One of the things that the pharmaceutical company has been very effective doing is minimizing those risks, both for physicians and for patients. So it's really around making those good choices. To treat pain. Pain should be treated. This isn't saying people should just live with their pain, but there's a variety of ways that we can think about managing pain in a lower risk way.
Many people, doctors, kind of take on the same role as a priest. I mean, they're trusted. They're not questioned. So, is there anything the city is doing or can do to put doctors on notice and say, look, we're keeping an eye on you, and we just want you to do the right thing? Is there any stick or carrot the city can put into place to kind of deal with that end of it?
So I would just begin by saying that I was a doctor seeing patients for a really long time, and I can assure you that my patients did not see me as a priest. And I got asked lots of questions, lots of good questions. And yes, we are working with providers all the time, both in terms of thinking about how to prescribe opioids judiciously, but also making sure that we expand their access to treatment for people who are already suffering from substance use treatment. So this is making sure that physicians understand what medication-assisted treatment is, how to do it, how to prescribe it well, how to feel comfortable, how to talk to their patients and understand addiction. Many patients come into a primary care. It's how primary care doctors do this. So it's an ongoing relationship. It's not a one and done. Health and Hospitals, again, has got tremendous support now for their clinicians and their emergency rooms. The Department of Health and Mental Hygiene is working with private physicians and doctors' offices throughout the city.
But I want to emphasize, to change behavior. I mean, it's just to make sure we're in sharp terms here. And I thank Mitch and everyone at Health and Hospitals because, they're working to make sure their approach is right. As Armenia said, we're reaching out to doctors across the spectrum, trying to make sure they understand how important it is to get this right. I agree with the premise of your question. I imagine Armenia was a very accessible doctor, but I think you're right that there's a lot of doctors who people don't quite know how to have a dialogue with, and they put them on a pedestal, and that can be a problem if you're trying to question whether there's been an overprescription. And Anne Marie had that exact situation. I want her to speak to it.
When my son was prescribed the pills, I had no clue what he was taking. I didn't think that a doctor would prescribe a prescription that would harm him. So, every prescription a doctor gives me, I Google it. I see the side effects. I see what it's for. And I say to the doctor, would you give that to your own child? That's the main thing. Don't give it out. Don't prescribe it if you're not going to give it to your own child. Don't let your child take it and look it up. Educate yourself. It's the biggest thing on educating. I wish I was more educated when my son was alive, because maybe that would have saved his life. But now I'm doing it, and I hope to save many lives, but educate yourself.
Amen. Well said.
A study out for about a year and a half looking at supervised injection facilities, which some people say could be used to help treat addiction.
Sure.
Can you tell us or update us on the status of that study, when it'll be presented?
Yeah, big and complex matter that's taken some very careful study. I think relatively soon we'll be able to speak to the results of that study. There's still some more work to do, but I do think pretty soon we'll be able to come back on that. I'm not going to put an exact point on it, but I think your colleagues would say when I say soon, it means something is happening soon. Go ahead.
So just for purposes of clarity, this is the legal action is against Big Pharma. That includes not only the manufacturers, but also the distributors of the drugs.
Correct.
And how many firms, do we have any idea of how many firms are involved here?
3 distributors. Right.
And so 7 drug makers, 3 distributors, is
That's
that right?
correct.
7 and 3. Okay, last call again on either the lawsuit or any other opioid-related issue before we turn over to other topics. Okay, again, want to say to everyone, again, so many people in this room who have fought against this epidemic and have helped to save lives. I want to really, really thank you for all you have done. It's making a huge difference, and we're going to stand with you as we continue this fight. Thank you, everyone. Just get the door shut. That's always my sign to go. Jesse, hit that door, would you? All right, we're good. Other topics? Yes, sir.
Mayor, a couple of months ago when DOI released its report on NYCHA about the lead poisoning and Shola, you said at the time that you had complete confidence in her, but as that continues to drip over the last couple of weeks, and with everything that's happening, not just with the lead, but with all the other problems in NYCHA, do you still have confidence in her?
Absolutely. Remember, first of all, just to get the facts right here, it was the Southern District, the U.S. Attorney, that started looking at this issue a couple of years ago. DOI came into it in a way, but let's be clear about the original work being done by the Southern District, and we continue to work very cooperatively with the Southern District. Second, I have said from the beginning, I believe it fundamentally. When you look at everything that's happened at NYCHA in 4 years, it is safer than it was. There's been tremendous progress on making more and better repairs. A lot of the scaffolding that used to be so much of a problem in the developments has come down. You have wireless, developments being wired so that people have access to internet. You just go down a whole list of things that are changing life in public housing. The finances have been stabilized. When Shola took office, the Housing Authority was literally teetering on the brink of bankruptcy. She righted the ship. So I want to give her a lot of credit. And look, I think it would have been a different situation if what was being done in the previous administration had complied with the law. That's where the problem started, as you know. I wish we had caught it a lot sooner. I'm very clear about that. I think we have our share of missteps. But when you put that mistake, which predates us, up against the totality of what she's achieved, I continue to have great faith in her. And the more important issue to me is how are we going to move forward with NYCHA? And I think she's the best person to move us forward. Yeah.
Was the decision to replace Mexicali related to these issues with the lead?
Look, we're at a natural inflection point after one term starting another term. There was a good conversation with Michael. It was a point for him where it made sense to make a change. It was a natural reset moment. We had Vito Mastacholo ready as someone who could come in, who I've known a long time and have worked with directly, who could come in and help us take the next step forward. And when you think about what we have to address now going forward in NYCHA, it's going to take, we know the resource situation is going to continue to be a challenge. We got to keep getting more out of less. And I am convinced Vito is someone who can drive us forward in that environment.
But did the legislature play a role in the decision?
Again, it's a much bigger point about it was the natural point. If he was ready to make a move, this was the right time to make it. He was. There were good conversations, and we all came to this understanding. Yes.
With all these other people, these 3 people from NYCHA that have left, top officials there, and I know you're probably weary of these questions, but I mean, how can you continue?
I thank you for noting that.
To praise Alatier, I realize the situation that came before, but to praise her when you have these top officials leaving and all these other problems bubbling around NYCHA.
I think when you look at everything that NYCHA has had to deal with and the needs of 400,000 people with decades of disinvestment by the federal government and honestly a lack of focus by the city government in previous administrations, someone who can come in and make real sustained progress on so many fronts obviously is a very strong leader and manager. I think sometimes, respectfully, in the media, there's a standard that I don't fully understand, which is, if one thing isn't done as well as we want, is that disqualifying of someone across the board? I think that's not a really humanly consistent equation. I look at all those other measures, and I see really big progress. Taking an institution that was a financial basket case and putting it on a firm footing. Taking developments that were very, very dangerous and helping to make them profoundly safer. improving the repairs, which matter so much to everyday lives of people, working with us to come up with a plan to fix the roofs. I mean, these are big, big things that are going to affect people's lives. There was one thing that wasn't handled right. There's no doubt about it. And we've been plain about that. But she did not create that problem. So when you think, as I do, as someone who has to manage the whole city, and you look at all the factors, everything someone has achieved, what they're capable of achieving going forward, their successes, and yeah, of course, everyone's going to have some failures. It nets out very clearly she's the right leader for the institution.
You said on Narrow Lewis last night that the delay in requesting funding from the state was a mistake.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering if there's anything you see in the bureaucracy of NYCHA, the city, as a whole, the administration itself, that can be streamlined. Is there anything specific you're looking at to kind of make things run more smoothly?
Well, it has to keep improving. Let's be clear. I mean, I would say that about any agency, but obviously NYCHA is one of the ones that needs real progress. But let's also put it in perspective and look at the next generation NYCHA plan. I would just argue to anyone, if you're sincere about covering this topic, look at the governing document. Look at the next generation NYCHA plan. And look at the fact that, in fact, there was some big moves made to streamline management. The agency was in some ways top-heavy. A lot of folks, through attrition, a lot of positions were changed. You judge management by a series of metrics. If you look at the metrics on crime, on repairs, on scaffolding, on a whole host of things, they've continued to progress. So something is improving in the management of NYCHA compared to the past, undoubtedly. We need to go farther. When I look at that situation with the state funding, look, this is something every bureaucracy is capable of taking too long to do something that they could do in a simpler fashion. So once that money was approved by the state, I would have argued rather than a substantial resident engagement process, which is always a valuable thing, I would argue given the vagaries of the state of New York and their slowness in getting us money, including money from 3 budgets ago we're still waiting for NYCHA, we should have gotten that in quicker. Now, that being said, the state of New York's had that proposal for over 2 months, and it was approved in their budget. So now that I have admitted we should have done a better job, I'd love you guys to go ask them when they're going to approve the money and get it to NYCHA for the boilers and the elevators. Yes, Josh.
Mayor, there's a bunch of protests that are planned tonight outside Senator Schumer's house. They're quite upset again for ending this shutdown. You talked a little bit about it last night. I just want your thoughts if you believe that the anger, particularly against Senator Schumer, by these progressive groups is correctly placed. If you share their deep frustration in how Democrats handled this shutdown.
I have a different perspective. If you said this was the last act in the drama, then I could understand the frustration. But it's not the last act in the drama. I have immense respect for Senator Schumer and what he's achieved for the state, but also how he's led the Democratic Senate contingent. The next act is the one that matters. I believe this fundamentally. To have a further 3-week pause, which is basically on top of the previous 2 or 3 week pause, I don't think that's the decisive moment. I think the next one is the decisive moment because we're coming up on that deadline for the Dreamers. But I want to remind people, and this is where I think the Democratic Party bluntly could do a better job in this moment, to remind people what this is about beyond just the Dreamers. What Senator Schumer and the Democrats in the Senate are fighting for is money to address the opioid crisis. They are fighting to address the crisis in Puerto Rico and to get resources to Puerto Rico that haven't gone, as well as to Florida and Texas. They're fundamentally addressing things well beyond the Dreamers that are essential, and they're trying to protect 700,000 Americans who, as we know, the vast majority of their fellow Americans believe they should be allowed to stay. So I think it's been too, as much as the Dreamer issue is immensely important, I think there's so much at stake here that goes beyond that issue that we have to put in fuller perspective. That all should be, in my opinion, the bargaining position for this next phase. That's what we're fighting for, to get all those things done. And I think it's important for not only the progressive movement, for the American people as a whole to see every single one of those is a basic matter of fairness. and to see that's what we're fighting for. Yeah.
So your answer to those who say Schumer caved, your answer, your response would be?
Again, I think the next milestone is the one that matters. I don't agree with that analysis. The next one is the one that matters. Yes.
Just follow up, and then do you think there's any significance to Senator Gillibrand voting no?
I'm not going to be your political pundit of the day, because I think the next one is the one that matters. Go ahead.
Another question, unrelated. On Friday, the city submitted an amicus brief in the Janus Supreme Court case. I was wondering if, Zachary, if you could talk a little bit about the argument the city is making and how the city will be monitoring that case next month.
Well, I mean, in a nutshell, the city is arguing from its perspective and its experience with the contributions required of those who are not members of unions, how it promotes a relationship between those who are represented and government employers that we think is positive and productive, and that has stood the test of time over the years. And that we believe that what originally justified the prior Supreme Court decisions that blessed these arrangements continues to be sensible.
If it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Correct.
I just want to add, because I left one very important item out in talking about the government shutdown. I mentioned this on New York One last night. The dish payments for our hospitals. This is not just a New York City issue. This is a national issue. And this is about making sure that public hospitals and a lot of private hospitals can continue to provide health care to people who don't have insurance and keep those hospitals going. So again, I think this is a bigger frame that we as Democrats and progressives need to get out there. These are the stakes. This is what we should be fighting for, and this is what we should be holding the Trump administration and the Republican leadership in the Congress accountable to. Please.
Emails from top MTA officials and members of Governor Cuomo's administration show that they were involved in requesting that statistics be altered, essentially, to blame more subway delays on power and content-related issues. Do you believe that you can trust the numbers that the MTA and the governor in particular are putting out in terms of how they're explaining the problems with the subway?
I've always been questioning about those numbers. And, beginning with the fact that they've never honestly answered the point that they took $456 million out of the MTA, earmarked funds for the MTA. I've made this point for months. I've never seen a serious attempt to refute it by the governor or his team. So let's be clear. If they want to deal honestly with the numbers, they would start by admitting that and moving that money. And if they tell you, oh, we have a deficit, that's just not the reality. The reality is, even when you have economic challenges, you make choices. If I took $456 million from you, before I started spending money on other things, I'd have to pay you back. So that's what they should do with the MTA. On the question of trying to create false blame, that's very troubling. And again, doesn't indicate seriousness in terms of taking on the problem and taking responsibility for the problem. Way back.
Going with the MTA, some of your officials are hosting a conference call today regarding funding. Can you give us some insight on what that will be about?
Look, broadly, we're going to continue to make the point that we don't like the direction the MTA is taking. And we're going to be speaking up about it, that a lot of things are being approved that are not the most essential. And we really have to recognize MTA, subways in particular, in a crisis. The money should go to address the crisis. It should not go to amenities or things that are nice to have but less essential. What I talk to New Yorkers about all the time, it's really clear what they want. They want to be able to get to work on time. They want to be able to get their kid after school on time. Number one is getting where you're trying to get on time. Related, they don't want to be stuck on a subway car for a long period of time. And all the other things, the countdown clocks and the Wi-Fi and painting, having lights on bridges, all that stuff doesn't matter compared to your subway actually arriving where it's supposed to arrive on time. So that's where the money needs to go. Yeah.
Question on your CQA from city planning, the senior housing. Live on New York came out with a report 2 years ago when it happened that the HUD 202 properties have areas where Live on New York would like to build on.
This is getting rather technical. Okay, try me.
They can't because of the zoning, okay? One such property coming up, and it's going to be the first case, is the Hebrew Home in Riverdale, which bought a property next to them in a R1 zone.
Okay, I got to stop you just for everyone's benefit. I don't know the details on this one, so we're going to have to get back to you on that. Yeah.
To build a senior project. Now, instead of affordable senior projects, it's going to be co-ops, actually.
Again, I don't know the details. I have to find the details, so we will happily get you an answer when we look at the details. Go ahead.
Hi, just a quick question. Why has HMO cut their detox treatments down to from inpatient from 30 days to 24 days to 14 days to 7 days to 5 days to outpatient care? And how do we address this HMO crisis?
Not something I know about. Dr. Palacio, do you know, or do you have to get back on that? HMOs in general, or is there a specific one? If you don't know, we can come back, but do you know something on that?
So I don't know. I can't speak to the HMOs in general. I mean, you would have to pose that question to them. I think and I don't know what beds in general. It's important to think about sort of what are there are some treatment modalities that are more effective than others, and I don't know if that's if they did an analysis.
Right, the treatment modalities did not include necessarily a bed. But why don't we have a follow-up on that?
Last two.
Okay, go ahead.
Can you just update your stand?
Whoa, there you are. Okay.
On congestion pricing, can you just reiterate your thoughts on this?
Yeah, so item one, I have not gotten the formal briefing on the plan. So I'm going to get that in the next few days, and I'll have more to say after that. Item two, the devil's in the details always. So we're really scrubbing the plan unto itself, and then, of course, there'll be a long legislative process, and we want to watch the details very, very carefully because they could determine whether something is fundamentally fair or unfair. Three, and definitive, and I worry about this a lot, the money must go to New York City. Whatever the proceeds are, they need to go into a lockbox for our subways and buses. I am far from convinced that that will be the case. We have, the per ride cost for a city rider on the subway or a bus is much, much less than for a commuter rider in the suburbs. There's always been a disparity where the MTA over-invests in the suburbs. I understand the political dynamics for some of the forces in Albany. I want to watch that one like a hawk. If New Yorkers are going to have to pay, we better get it back. But so that's some important qualifiers. What I see as progress compared to, I've said many times publicly, there were two previous plans, the Bloomberg plan of a decade or more ago, the Move New York plan from 4 or 5 years ago. What's progress compared to those two is taking the bridges out of the equation. It's a very important step, particularly in terms of fairness for Brooklyn and Queens. So I think this is a better way of looking at the approach because they took the bridges out of the equation. But I got to see a lot more. There's a whole lot of unanswered questions before I can take a formal stand.
And I quote you saying you'll be watching it like a hawk.
Oh, yes. Okay, wait. I'm sorry. I'm going to override the tough Eric Phillips. I'm going to be a liberal here. Go ahead.
In your gut, do you think the legislature is really going to approve it?
I don't. I want to be consistent here. Many times you all have asked the question, the millionaire's tax is supposed to be dead on arrival, right? If you follow that logic, just listen to what Flanagan's saying about congestion pricing. That's supposed to be dead on arrival too. I don't buy dead on arrival with hardly anything. Sometimes I honestly see a specific case where I think you're talking about pure impossibility. I don't think millionaire's tax should be off the table. I still think it's the better approach. Of course, something like congestion pricing in this new form might have a better chance of surviving. But both are going to face tremendous challenges, undoubtedly. I still argue that because millionaire's tax only affects 5-borough residents, it may end up being more palatable to suburban legislators than any kind of congestion pricing. Mark my words, that's a conceivable scenario. I also think millionaire's tax is better because it's bluntly more reliable, and because we would include the Fair Fare program, the half-price MetroCard for low-income New Yorkers, as part of it. But I don't want to get into the punditry. Something has to give. At the end of this legislative session, the governor and the legislature have to come up with some long-term funding for the MTA, or else they're going to have a profound political problem on their hand. Go ahead, Juliet.
Is congestion pricing the only way to manage traffic? Wouldn't there be a better traffic management plan for Manhattan?
There's a lot of different pieces to managing traffic. I think we have to be really clear. This is not a magic bullet. I urge you guys, look, it's going to be at minimum a 2-month plus debate if this goes into the budget. If it goes into the legislative session, you're talking about more like a 3 or 4 month debate. We've got to get out of the sort of stereotypes about all this. If we're addressing congestion, it's a citywide problem. It's a 5-borough problem. I put out a congestion plan a few months ago that spoke to changes we could make, not just in Midtown Manhattan, but a lot of other places. And those are just beginning. I'm particularly excited about the notion of banning deliveries during rush hour in key places. We're starting to do that right now. We're going to see if that works, we're going to expand that. That's hugely important to addressing congestion. There's a lot of other pieces, the Block the Box campaign, all of these things are going to matter. The proposal from the governor obviously only affects one piece of Manhattan. Now, in that one piece of Manhattan, we have to analyze what the impact would be on congestion, and we have to also analyze how it connects with these other strategies. But no, anyone who says the only congestion problem in New York City is in Midtown Manhattan doesn't live with the rest of us, where most of us live in the outer boroughs. And second of all, this pricing approach is one of many strategies you'd have to talk about if you really want to change the congestion picture in New York City.
So do you think it's helpful to go to the legislature with a plan B that takes the money equation out?
I would say it a little differently. Whatever happens in the legislature, to the previous question, I'm not going to be surprised. They could act any number of ways. Or they could do a hybrid of different plans. We don't know yet. We only know they better come up with money for the MTA for everyone's benefit and their own. But if we're talking about congestion, we have to move forward with all the other things we've proposed, regardless of what happens in Albany. And we've just begun. I think we're going to find other things that we can do as a city. Second, and you remember when we put out our congestion plan, some of these things have to do with state highways, where we need to come together. Staten Island Expressway or Cross Bronx are good examples. Again, has nothing to do with the quote-unquote congestion pricing plan that came out of that commission. So there's a whole host of other things that have to keep moving no matter what and deepen. And they all have to be looked at how they affect each other. So I don't think it's like a plan B. I think we're going to keep moving because I'm not going to be shocked if Albany does something big, something small. We have to keep moving in the meantime. David.
So at the end of the federal investigation last year, June Kim put out a statement, and then you responded to it and said that essentially they had showed, quote, that your staff and colleagues had, quote, acted in a manner that was legal and appropriate and ethical throughout. That has been confirmed by the results of this investigation. So Kim, in an interview yesterday, said essentially that's not, you're mischaracterizing what he said. Quote, we do not ask the question, is the conduct ethical or appropriate? And he said, as a private citizen, I certainly hope that a decision by a prosecutor not to bring criminal charges is not the standard that we should expect from our leaders. How do you respond to that?
Exactly the way I did before. Got nothing to add. I'm very comfortable. We did everything legally and appropriately and ethically.
Do you still believe that the investigation found that?
I said exactly what I believe. Go ahead.
Congestion pricing, is it your understanding that you're going to need a home rule message? Will the council have to vote? Will you have to weigh in? Or is this all state?
We need to know more about, first of all, what we might be voting on. Remember, again, guys, patience is a virtue here. This is a proposal from a commission. We will see what happens next with this proposal from the commission. First of all, we have to understand what it is. Then we have to understand what the legislature is going to do with it, when they're going to do it. There's a whole lot of unanswered questions. The last time around, there was a home rule in 2005 or whatever it was. There was a home rule. But it really depends on the specifics whether a home rule is required. So we'd have to see what the ultimate legislation looks like. Yes?
So going back to the government shutdown, how Senator Schumer and the Democrats have handled the deal to end the government shutdown, the DACA issue, what impact do you think that will have on 2018 races? Will it help or hurt Democrats?
I think it's, Yeah, I think the next, again, I really believe this, the next milestone is the one that matters. And we have a chance there to address the 700,000 Americans who should be allowed to stay, the opioid crisis, the needs of our hospitals, and the fate of Puerto Rico. A powerful collection of issues that need progress. That's what we should be fighting for. I think we can and should do that, and that will send a very powerful message to people all over the country. But again, I think we're getting a little too micro after one brief delay followed by another brief delay. It's not time to judge what the impact is going to be on November. The final package is when we can judge what the impact will be on November. Thank you, everyone.